Hello, everyone, people of the internet, citizen of the world. It is the last Friday of the month again, and it means it's time for Aleph Academy sessions. My name is Willam. I'm representing the creative team from Aleph Singapore, as well as the Aleph Academy committee, and I'll be your host for today. For those of you who are new in this space, Aleph Academy is an initiative launched by Aleph Labs as an organization, and we will treat this as a borderless classroom that allows you to share knowledge, build a community of learning that kind of extends, from human-centered design, engineering, research, and culture. Isn't it exciting? Well, today you guys are in for a treat because I myself am pretty excited to welcome the head of engineering from Aleph to take some time to impart some knowledge from engineering perspective, from design perspective as well, to all of us. Please welcome Mr. Janaka Jaya Surya. Hello, Sir Janaka. How are you doing? I can see that
Hey,
you're
William.
smiling and all that. Are you excited to do this?
I think you are the best hype man ever.
Okay. Well, I know that you are very, very busy persons, right? So thanks for taking the time to join us in this space. We have been working on a few projects together. I know you pretty well already, I guess, but I might need the audience to, get to know more of you a little bit for as today's speaker. Can you tell us more about your background and what sort of stuff that you actually do in LF?
Yeah, William. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. For everyone on YouTube, I think this is streaming live on YouTube. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here. So, I'm a software engineer at Aleph. I focus mostly on mobile applications, both iOS and Android. Bit of back end stuff I dabble once in a while, but I'm mostly focused on mobile applications. Before that, I ran the startup, which is now defunct, which is done and dusted. And for a long time before that, I was from a research background. I worked in wireless comms research. Yeah, so I guess
Wow. Hmm.
in Aleph, I'm kind of known as the process guy beyond the engineering part.
Nice. Well, as I pass to you for your content sharing for today, maybe we can start with, I'm pretty curious at, the title that you choose for today's event, which is called, FX thinking. Can you walk us through, the thought process behind this, as you continue with your presentation for the rest of the, slides?
Yeah, so funny story. I think the slides should go up right now. So funny story. When we started, I guess working on this, I had no clue what I wanted to talk about. So we just came up with this fairly vague topic, which leaves us enough room to change along the way. So we call it FX thinking, right? I think most of our engineers who saw the banner and the poster and the EDM and stuff like that assumed it was about functional programming, which is, I guess, a fair assumption. But it's not entirely about that. Let's start there. But it's I want to talk more about program management and how to do program management efficiently. And we'll walk through some case studies here. So yeah, so I think just to give everyone, because this is going to be informed by my knowledge of functional programming, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. So if you just think about functional programming, it just makes the focus of your code about functions, inputs and outputs, and it makes it really easy to understand, to troubleshoot, to debug stuff like that, as opposed to what we are taught in school. Right now, most of us went through some kind of computer science education. We were taught mostly about OOP concepts, like object-oriented programming, so modeling the real world as objects and as attributes of objects. Uh, Whereas functional programming is mostly about transformations, right? You transform, if you think about user login, like you model the login as a transformation of credentials into a logged in user, something like that, right? And when you apply this concept to a stream of events, we call this functional reactive programming. Yeah. And this was quite useful to in my research background. We had to most of my work involved working with streams of data, and this is where I really had to learn. Like I had to learn about Scala, languages like that. Scala is one of those esoteric languages which has a very niche usage, but it's a very nice language. So I fell in love with that, and these days I work with a lot of Kotlin and Swift. So this is kind of my area. But I also, as my role kind of changed from an individual contributor to kind of more stream management, engineering management kind of stuff. So this is what I know to do, right? So this I try to apply this knowledge on how I could manage a team, manage the engineering stream. So I saw this. So if you see what's on the screen is this is like a very familiar value stream. It's simplified obviously, but you have ideas which gets transformed into some business analysts and some designers get together, right? Epics, and then you go through further refinement. You come up with user stories, and user stories get turned into code, get tested, and then released. Yeah. So my domain was mostly in the build area, where we write code and turn into user stories into code. So I tried to apply the same knowledge, function, input, output, measure the throughput, the lead time. These are things that you can measure from a functional perspective. And I've been had various varying levels of success. Sometimes I've done really well with this, sometimes it hasn't worked out, and let's kind of try to understand why, right? When this expands, I will explain. And this is kind of where I found that problems happen, right? Problems generally happen in the interfaces of these things, right? When because you're producing an output for someone to consume, but you are not fully aware of that. Let's say, William, you're a designer, you produce designs for us to consume, and maybe I'm not fully ready to understand how to consume this. So this is where we have problems, right? So I found that I was embedded in for one of my engineering projects. I was embedded in a design team, a team of engineers. We were embedded in design team, and I got to know about a lot about the kind of work that you do. So I got to learn about a bit of design thinking, and I found that maybe like applying design thinking knowledge to solve some of these interface problems, that's kind of a interesting idea, right? It's a unique idea, right? So we'll look at a couple of case studies, but William, maybe you want to quickly tell us about what design thinking is.
Yes, for sure. I mean, for me, a lot of people say that design thinking is good for you, is good for everybody. But I think sometimes the context is like taken differently, depending on the people who take that. First of all, I wouldn't consider myself expert. I'm more of a believer or practitioner of design thinking. I mean, if I can put it into simple way for people to understand, it's kind of more of a mindset, rather than guidelines for you to like really follow strictly. It starts with changing the way we think. That is the basic design thinking that we want to apply. However, if you want to put it into a well-defined dictionary explanations, I would say design thinking is a creative problem-solving methods, that built around the interest of understanding the people, the users, the consumer, the clients. Combine this with a collaborative approach, iterative manner. It can solve some of the most complex problems in product development landscape, or any other problems that you have in day-to-day simple challenge, right? And you might be asking, how does it differ from traditional problem solving, right? Well, let me tell you, traditional problem solving always pinpoint a problem that most likely kind of assumed by one or two persons, and move forward, jumping into solutions. that is very straightforward, and it might not be effective. From the name itself, design thinking, a lot of people also assume that it's only exclusive to designers, because I think there's a name design tag to the title itself. But I would say that it's not exclusive to designers. It opens to everybody who want to open their mind into applying this school of thoughts. you know Design thinking, on the other hand, start with observation, understanding the users. You know, the problem itself actually lies with the people itself. So we need to get in touch with the people, you know, understand the culture and the context of the problem, looking at what people need, what people want, how they struggles in that problems, rather than looking it at the surveys. So that is the first step that kind of separates design thinking from any other traditional problem solving methodology. There are a few ways that uh, people can start applying design thinking. If you Google online, or if you attend any design thinking workshop, you can find these five-step stages, or five-step recipe, as you can say. It starts with building empathy. So building empathy means we need to get close with the humans that having that problems or struggles, right? Build that kind of understanding. And then the next step is to define the problems already. It is important that you clear all assumptions or hypotheses that you have established previously, and start getting insights from the research that you have done with the users, right? And then the third step would be to ideate. Ideate means to come up with solution. Of course, we have to ideate collaboratively, with the people that might have problems, so that it's more inclusive. And then we jump into prototype. I mean, the whole idea of prototyping is to actually put up a plan or structure before you actually put it to test, verify the solutions, whether it has achieved the goals that you intend or not. So that's the whole idea of design thinking, is to put human at the center of the stage. If there's something that I can share from design perspective.
Yeah. I
Do you
think
have any
you,
opinions, Janaka?
I think you're being quite humble. I know that you guys have a very strong creative team behind you, and this is what you do day in and day out, right? So for me to observe this, how you do this for product design,
Hmm.
was quite fascinating, and I tried to learn from it and try to apply some of these things when I was facing some problems on my own. So let's go through one story, right? So we had a program where we had to work in two Git remotes, and for reasons I can't get into, these were in two different networks. Right? Our active development happens in one network, but for deployments, you need to go to a different Git remote, and you need to publish the code somewhere else. So for legacy reasons, these two Git systems never shared a history, right? So for a long time, the way to work, the ways of working that was defined was the team just has to copy the code, right? You just once you're done, you just switch your network, and you copy the code over. And I think if you're an engineer who's familiar with Git, you know that this is a inefficient process, and most of all, you lose the great advantages that Git brings. That you lose the commit history, the audit trail, and all this kind of stuff, the capability to roll back. Um, you lose all of this. So, and it got even worse because some people started contributing on the remote that deployments happen. So when you copy code, we've been in situations where we've had done conflict resolution wrong, or we lost some of the work. So the team was spending a lot of time working to fix this thing instead of being productive and focusing on their work. So but still, from a high level, the way people see this is it's just copying code, right? What's the big problem, right? You think it's an easy thing to do, just give it to someone, you copy. What's the big deal? Just copy code, right? But you, after a while, um, we can see as the workload gets higher, you need to ferry code quite more often. The productivity of the team is going on. So we try to apply some of these learnings from design thinking. Right, the first thing you have to do is you have to actually do the task yourself. I think this is what William means by empathize, right? Just to sit with one of the engineers and understand, observe him first, and then actually try to do the same thing ourselves. Then we were able to fully understand what it means to, pull, change network, copy all the code, and check for all these things manually, which is not great, right? It's not a good situation to be in. And then you understand, okay, why people are not happy about this, why things are getting delayed, and most importantly, why the productivity of the team is not good, right? So this is a problem to be solved. We understood what it means to do this by empathizing, and we define what the problem is, how to get the code across, and we sat together collaboratively. I think that's an important part, right, William? to to do it together with the people who will eventually, try use this solution. So quite often times we come up with solutions, but we are never collaborated with the actual people who are supposed to execute these things, right? So we came up with a couple of ideas. I think for this case, anyone looking at this in hindsight, the solution is quite clear: is to make the Git histories share ancestry, right? But we went through a couple of solutions. We had the team try it, and we settled on, we made a compromise to throw away our existing development remote and create a new development remote that is actually a descendant from the deployment remote. So again, if you understand Git, you know that this makes it easier to push code from one remote to the other, and you retain all the goodness of Git to do conflict resolution and stuff, right? So this also we didn't immediately say this is the way. We actually we model this whole thing outside of our current work in a separate repository. We got the team to try this. So it's kind of like your prototype and test stage. And once people got familiar and they understood how to do it, actually, the team was quite happy that they can do this. And this is kind of how we achieve this kind of solution, right? But so this is an interesting code. Um, so what actually happened is, it worked well for 3 to 4 months, but what happened is actually those network isolation is there for a reason, and my engineering leaders did warn me about this reason why it's there, and I kind of ignored it because I didn't have a bigger picture, or I didn't consider the bigger picture. And this switching network and using Git on both networks on the same system is limited to 1 or 2 users. So there are like 10, 20 users who are able to copy code. But when you switch to this method, it limits the ferrying to 1 or 2 users. So it ended up actually that this 1 or 2 users were being the bottleneck, because they had to not only concentrate on their own work, but they also had to, anytime someone produces work on the development remote, they have to move it to the deployment remote, and they ended up being the bottleneck. So this is, I guess, what it means to say today's problems come from yesterday's solutions, right? It's not fully appreciating that all the complexities that are behind the scenes. So it's very, I come back to functional thinking. It's a nice way to model and simplify a value stream like this. It's easy to understand, easy to visualize, but actually the way things operate, there's lots of other things that go into these things, right? So many other things. Budget is a constraint, deadlines are there, how people react to these things lot of things to do. And I think this is where design thinking is great, but this is where an idea of systems thinking is becomes useful. You know, systems thinking is a vast field, I guess, and by no means am I an expert, but I've tried to learn some of the common traps that are defined, and some of the modeling techniques to understand how problems should be modeled and so on. And this has helped to think about from a bird's eye view perspective, and then also a very solution oriented perspective, like William spoke about design thinking, right? So let's talk about another case study. William, you want to take this one?
Hmm. All right. So for the next case study, I think this is something that a lot designers or even developers can relate to when it comes to quality control, right? So part of the designer's responsibility is to actually assure that the output that has been delivered and being put in production is kind of aligned with the screen designs that designers has handed over to the developers, right? So a lot of times, that there are a lot of struggles from the designer sides, having to spend so much time to kind of look into the UI defects. As you can see on the screenshot, these are some of the documentations that designers has to do to documents, in terms of padding, it might be lacking a few pixels off and stuff like that. So this kind of thing is really important for the designers, but maybe in the developer's point of view, that may not be considered, as something that is very critical. So if I talk to the designer, sometimes they mention that, okay, developers only care about functionality. So there are a lot of like blaming also, back and forth checking that ultimately, stress out everybody, from designers and developers. And if we keep this along the way, right, it will create a lot of conflicts, a lot of distrust, um, a lot of frictions as well, between the collaboration between the designers and developers. So do you have any opinion, Janaka,
Yeah.
about this? I am pretty sure that you can relate also to certain extent.
Yeah, so I have been in these shoes a lot of the times. In fact, just before release, design conducted an audit, and they came up with like 300 defects. It's not good for anyone when there are 300 defects just before release, right? So actually, I think what this case study, like systems thinking, has this defined trap called shifting the burden. Right? What I think from an engineer's perspective, what happened is, like, I might not fully understand how these designs, how to implement these designs, but I just made a bunch of assumptions, and I just implemented, and then I shifted the burden to the design team to audit and tell me what's wrong, and instead of you know getting the necessary education of how to process this. Yeah.
Hmm. So I think you mentioned that kind of pain points from the developers as well, right? Which makes sense. So by utilizing design system, it's not only looking at the surface of the problem, but actually getting down to what is the core issues that people might face. For example, from the developer side, maybe there is actually timeline that they need to cater, that they forego all the cosmetic issues for now. From the designer side, maybe they think that this is supposed to be developers' work. Why can't they do it properly, right? So each of these persona have its own problem. So with design thinking, we need to like get down to the business with them, get to know the core problems, and find solutions together. It cannot be just one-sided. It cannot be a solutions that only targeted for designers. It will never solve the issues. So by applying design thinking thoughts, right? We reach out to the persona, get understanding, ideate collaboratively, get the designers and developers together, and then ideate on what sort of solutions that might work for both departments. So based on my experience in doing design audit, some of the proposals that we do in terms of the solution include There are 3 items over there on the screenshot. Number one is to have designers and developers to sit down and do the pairing on the sites. That can build the relationship closer between the designers and developers. Number two is to have lunch and learn. So this will be a platform of knowledge sharing as well, similar to academy, but more from designers to developers. But developers can also, share something from the designers. This will kind of build understanding from developer side also in terms of how we create our layout, right? In terms of content area, there might be padding left and right and stuff like that. So if developers know about how we do our design, then they can start applying uh, what the designers thinks into their implementation. Number three is design system is the big thing nowadays. I think design system is one of the solutions that born out of design thinking initiative as well. It's to make designers construct the component or build the component like how developers would build it in their uh, developers environment. So I think these are some of the solutions that uh, taken out from design thinking exercise that we have done among the design team and developers team. So this is just one case study example
Yeah.
from my side.
So,
Yeah.
like if you maintain a bird's eye view as someone who is watching the value stream, and you see that these problems are occurring down the chain, and design is spending a lot of time on these audits, you will realize that at some point in time the development team is shifting the burden of processing and understanding and overloading someone else down the stream, the testing people or something like that. You will be able to observe this if you're keeping an eye on this, right? And what happens is, the more designers do the audit, the engineers tend to be less aware of what they need to do, because they think, oh, it's handled, right? So they think, it's 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 somebody else is going to take care of it. It's not my problem. So we can um, we can observe these patterns if you have maintained a good bird's eye view, and you're watching out for these traps, like shifting the burden that is defined in systems thinking. I'm not sure if we lose William. Are you still here, William? Okay. Anyway, let me proceed. I'm not sure if he's still there or not. Okay, you're back, William.
Yeah.
I think we lost you for a minute.
No worries.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is another interesting one, tragedy of the commons. Um, what this means is like, let's go through another example, right? One of the groups that were working on a product had to deal with a lot of dynamic UI, and there was someone really smart on the team, had great intentions. He developed this kind of shared library or templating library that can handle this kind of dynamics, and it was a really good solution, and it functions well. But over time, what happened was, there are varying use cases, right? Every use case is slightly different, and this it's not only this person who's contributing to this shared library. A lot of other engineers had to start using it. So what they did was, they just added on top of it, made a small variant, and uh, you customize it to their own behavior. Then another team came along and they customized it to their own behavior, and this kept happening and happening until this library is like a big monster, right? It's actually was a good thing, good shared resource. It was functioning well, but everyone, because people are selfish, right? Teams are selfish. They want to achieve their goal first. So after doing this for a while, this templating library that was good, it became harder and harder to use, and it became harder to solve troubleshoot issues. And it came to a point like anyone who wants to contribute coding to this, or troubleshoot this, is very scared. Oh, I don't want to touch this. Can you get someone else to do it? Right? So this is kind of like you have a good shared resource, but people use it to their own advantage without thinking about the bigger picture. And eventually, it comes to a point that this shared resource is usable to no one, including the people who initially started making good use of it. Right. So, with this learning, actually, the next time we were going into this situation, we understood a bit, and what we did is had a good um, governance layer, right, to make sure that not even the use cases that are coming through had to be properly standardized. And we don't want to put a very strict governance and say nobody can contribute, only one team can contribute. We still want to encourage people to contribute. So we had the proper policies and training required to get contributions from outside teams. And so whenever someone contributes, it's in a like a structured way, and we train about how to maintain public APIs with multiple contributors, right? How important it is to be very strict about your APIs and not adding new APIs whenever you need functionality. Think about it properly, not exposing for every use case, question the use case for things like this, right? This is what the governance team's responsibility is. And then most importantly, we found that building a good culture to encourage people to contribute, this I think is turned out to be at least the most important thing. And this turned out to be a very sustainable effort, right? And it's still functional today, and people are still using it today. People are still um, and at a point when you have built a strong culture, this thing becomes autonomous, right? The responsibility of the governance team becomes less and less. So things just start functioning very well. Yeah. Any thoughts, William, before we go to the next
No,
case study?
you kind of summarized it pretty well already.
Okay, so either I'm extremely clear and you 100% understood, or you totally lost me and you're way too polite to tell me that. Okay, so for the last, I want to take a look at icebergs. Okay, I think this is probably a bit difficult conversation to have, right? If you're an engineer or maybe even if you're a designer, you know that we tend to work quite long hours and hard, and there's a lot of churn, right? People leave, um, so if you try to look at this problem and you see the tip of the iceberg, you might think that, okay, how do we retain the talent? Yeah. And maybe it's just increasing, giving better benefits, or increasing your salary, or you might even just blame the environment, right? If you think about specifically in Singapore, what's happened due to COVID is there aren't many engineers around, so there's a lot of competition in the market, so people tend to move around in their work, right? But actually, if you look inside, you might understand, instead of being reactive and doing all these things, you might understand a bit better of what's going on, and you might start to see some patterns, right? If your senior engineers or your principal engineers are moving on at a constant rate, like a principal engineer is like one of the best assets an organization can have, right? They're quite good at what they do. Or you can observe a pattern like maybe apathy towards work, and you're not excited about what you're doing anymore. If you can observe this pattern, you start to realize, okay, external factors are something, but something inside is also maybe we can look into. And if you dig deeper, we can try to understand what are the structures that hold these things up, right? And there can be varying things. These are some examples, right? Poor planning is one. Explosion of when you're growing fast, so you have a lot of new hires who are probably not ready to do what they are meant to do. So maybe some of the principal engineers' time and effort goes into training them instead of achieving what they need to achieve, and they get overloaded. Yeah, context switching, I think, is very, for people looking into engineers performance. Context switching is, I think, the most important thing to keep in mind, right? It's very hard for engineers to, while you're working on some, maybe not just engineering, maybe for you also, right? When you're working on something, and it's very hard when someone tells you, okay, can you drop this for 5 minutes and help me out do this other thing, and I need to change everything, and then get distracted and distracted and distracted. All right, so it takes a fair amount of warm up time. Personally, when I'm coding, it takes a fair amount of warm up time to get coding and to get the ideas flowing. And if you disrupt that, your productivity goes down, right? Another thing, a serious thing, is aging tech stacks, right? People who are not, organizations who are not adopting good CI/CD practices. We do still do things manually or deliver builds manually, or even if you're working still in some antiquated language that nobody wants to work on. These are, and you're not making an active effort to modernize these things. These could be some of the structures that causing these patterns. Right? And if you dig further, I think what you'll find, understand, I have spoken to some of the, I mean, because the nature of our work, we get to speak to a lot of clients and people in different organizations, right? We find that actually there's a deep, in situations like this, there's a deep rooted mental model people have that, okay, fighting the machine is not worth it. This is just the way, right? We can't help it. This is just a way. And this is like a kind of a, and actually, if you think about it, this mental model is what causes poor planning and allows it to happen. It's what causes the context switching, and in turns leads to the churn, leads to the burnout of people, right? And I find that if, instead of just looking at the tip of the iceberg and reacting to some event, if you dig really down to the end, and when you figure out what the mental model of people, how they're operating on, and if you change these things, that is where the true transformation can happen. You bring in, you apply some of your design thinking knowledge to change the mental model of people, or expand, or how to get people to adopt new technology stacks, how to get people to plan better, all these things. Yeah, so I think this is the main content of our talk today, William. So for me, I think to be successful, I mean, I'm fairly learning. I've mastered this about like 1% of what I really have to. What I found that is like, if you have adopt a system thinking mentality to have a bird's eye view, and also a design thinking mentality at the same time, to focus into collaborative problem solving, and the ability to switch between these two constantly, is what makes you like quite capable, quite powerful, and I think this helps you to function better in a role. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Janaka. I think I have a few questions coming from the ground, passionately, I believe. We we have
Just
one,
throw me the easy ones.
the easy ones. I don't think they are easy, but let's try. Um, Question number one, we have a question from Sasha. She asks, a designer owns the design and ensure it follows through to development, right? An engineer owns the code and ensure a flawless build. So each of them have their own, objectives and goals as well. Instead of pushing the blame between the two, how do you think we can each split the ownership of question and answer session? Maybe what she's referring to is the quality control, the QC.
Um, okay. I think, right, the problem is if you are an engineer or if anybody has worked with me, they know that you can't simply stop and say, okay, my code functions well, it's supposed to do what it's do, was, and just stop at that, right? And you are responsible for the overall output of it's not an individual effort. You are responsible for the end product, right? And one of the things that I learned very early in Aleph, right, thanks to great engineering leaders here, uh, is like if you are having trouble understanding what's going on, come arriving at a solution, you think about the end user first, right? If you always have your end user in mind, whatever you do, you will most likely come to the right solution. And for me, it's like if everybody adopts this mindset, it's not just about just writing code, right? When you're writing code, you need to think about what the downstream people are supposed to do with your output. What do the testers do with your builds? When you're designing, you should design in a way that engineers are supposed to consume and easy to understand. And I think I have seen in some programs like with the use of Figma. I think you guys love to use Figma, and it's a great product. And I have seen new ways of working, which makes it extremely easy for us to collaborate. Right? To have a conversation right on the designs and how experiences should be crafted. It makes this collaboration much easier, and that shared ownership is is that I think makes good products.
Hmm. Thanks. I think from my perspective, right, for me, it kind of takes two hands to clap, you know. Design and developers team kind of needs to come together first. That is the most basic activity that they can do, maybe through
Yeah.
workshop and stuff like that, and find the solutions that work for their process, their product that they are working, and the people within that organization. So maybe they have a different way of structuring their team and stuff like that. So it's very subjective, but they need to find uh, one activity in that collaborations. And then there is no one hard rule about this, of course, right? But I would say each department first need to have a sense of pride and the fact that we are delivering as one team and not as two
Yeah,
teams. We are working on one product, right, together.
absolutely.
So maybe designers can start doing more knowledge sharing, for the developers so that they appreciate how we do things, right? Developers can also start sharing, how they build their framework. So designers at the same time can also get to know what happens on the other side because a lot of times it seems like there is a wall in between. You do your own thing, I do my own thing, you know.
Yeah.
So I think this create like
Yeah,
a friction
and
between, you
I think the increasing that collaboration, that shared ownership is the key. And funny story, we have run these brown bag sessions, right,
know.
as a part of our working culture. And one of the things we did was we had a design team, an engineering team. We took a design from a different project, and we gave it to the engineers and said, okay, we played a small game, and we said, okay, actually it was a design of a credit card. Okay, and we said, okay, within these 5 minutes, you are supposed what's the game called? I think it's called taboo, where you're not supposed to use certain words. We told the engineers, you're supposed to explain this design. You can't show it. You're supposed to explain this design to the designer, and the designer will draw it in Figma, but you can't use these words. And after 10 minutes of doing this, all that could be communicated across was a white box. That's all we could come up with.
I see.
It's a fun thing, but these kind of that's why you can't underestimate the cultural aspect of doing these things to foster collaboration.
Mm. And I think maybe some fun facts to share. I mean, the next trend in the future, right, is that people start looking for designers who understand coding. So probably that's the
Yeah.
next big thing already, creative coding, as what they say. We have one more questions over here coming from the same person. Wow, Sasha really very enthusiastic about this whole thing. What do you think makes a good designer developers relationship? How do you envision it, maybe, if I can put it into a their words? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's no silver bullet answer. I guess I think is having an open mind, right? Being able to appreciate, like, to design is, you know, one of the things that go wrong in, let's put, in an engineer's mental model. What we think is, oh, it is easy to design like this. So it's easy for you, William. It's easy for you to do your job, but my job is harder than yours. I think this is the biggest mistake. You need to appreciate the complexities of doing what your upstream does. It's not easy to design those experiences, think about behaviors, and stuff like that. And that's certainly something I don't know how to do. So you need to appreciate that complexity. Once you think, as an engineer, once you start thinking like that, it's easier to collaborate and understand each other. I think that's what I would say.
Mm, good one. We have question from Kayanush from the project management side. Question is, instead of feeling frustrated when product managers cut down product features to get an MVP, right? I think you are very familiar with this. Should designers look to turn into an opportunity to increase the quality of the experience?
Tough question. So
Mm,
it really depends on the scenario. But what this leads to is like, you cut you or you maybe without cutting down scope, you might say my MVP is getting delayed.
mm,
Okay,
mm,
what this delay does is, okay, then someone thinks there's a delay happening, but my customers will think this delay means I'm getting more features. So you put more features on top of the delay, which leads to more delays, and this has like a negative spiraling effect, right? So how to balance this, I really don't know. It's just, I think, adopting that system's mindset, understanding all the complexities that goes into building certain functionalities, because you need to understand there are certain, if you're thinking about a banking system, is not just a mobile application, right? Behind the scenes there are like transaction processing, all these kind of other systems you need to get integrated. So understanding people who can understand these things better, if they weigh in to MVP decision making early on in the process, you might get better at what you can scope out to build. Right?
mm,
And all the other good concepts of continuous development or deployment is like, as soon as you have something usable and useful to the user, you should ship it out. Right? You should get it as fast as possible to go. You should not think about MVP and keep collecting features and keep delaying. As soon as you have something, you should ship it out. Yeah.
mm. Cool. We have one from your peers, Seungwoo, right? Do designers in general feel constrained by system thinking at the expense of creative thinking? Maybe I'll let you to answer from your perspective first.
I think you should answer this. Okay, I think I don't know because I'm not a designer. I don't know, um, but maybe it does. But the important thing is to understand be aware of the complexities. Right? It's not about having to solve it at that point in time or immediately solve it. It's just to be aware of the complexities, aware of the traps you can get into, and then maybe when you're designing, you will understand. Okay, maybe what you should do. I think maybe William, you're in a better position to answer this one.
Okay, I cannot say for every designers. I mean, I put disclaimer first. It really depends on, the level of maturity from the way they think, right? Sometimes they are being constrained by maybe the process itself, right? Sometimes they are being constrained by clients' requirement. All these come into shaping how they deliver the output. But if they can put design thinking into place, I believe that can take them anywhere that they want.
Yeah. And
Uh,
system thinking is not about about the like getting constrained. It's about embracing the complexity, just being aware about it and embracing the complexities and understanding synergies about all the moving parts. I would think, I don't know, I would think that would in fact make you a better designer or a better engineer. That's the whole point of this presentation, right? That's what I'm trying to say.
Correct. I think we have one last questions coming from your favorite person, which is Emily. How do you think an organization culture can help to improve the synergy between creative and engineering team? I think this is something that you can share. I think we have done some hackathon and co-creation events. If you can share some of that.
Yeah, I think the previous thing that we mentioned, we have drawn that. This is actually something that I learned from your team here, because
Mm,
our general practice is to, when we go into work, we put on our hoodie and then just go. Don't talk to anyone. That's what we do. But I observed that the design team that we were embedded in, every week or so, they have lunch together, and some just while having lunch, they discuss a certain topic, and that's what we call brown bag. So we started adopting this and sharing knowledge. We started joining there, so we get to appreciate what they do. So these kind of things are important parts of a organization culture. This is one, and just to think outside of your daily work, how to collaborate. Those kind of events are great. And the hackathon, I think we did for one of the operations is to promote the adoption of one of those shared libraries we were talking about, right? Promote the adoption. So we organize a hackathon, this kind of thing, internal. Sometimes it's very hard for people to see the value in doing these things, because we are always focused on just produce, work, right? But we noted that doing this hackathon allows some of the engineers to understand how to use certain designs, how to appreciate and how to use it well, and that eventually leads to a reduction in design defects. So that's a good thing, right?
mm.
But unfortunately, this value only you realize maybe 2 3 months down the line.
I think from my perspective, right, for those people who are joining this space from other companies, right, if you are struggling with these issues, maybe what I can suggest is to have a design thinking workshop, between the designers team and developers team, and kind of find the tune somewhere in between, and come up with solutions in a more collaborative way. If I can suggest that. We have one more question, one last question before we discuss about what's gonna be for dinner. This is from Jubilee, UI UX designer from Aleph. What are some things that you wished a designer slash developer understood about each other?
Mm. Uh, from a purely, I guess, from a purely engineering perspective, if we could come out with a way of understanding how layout and rendering is done on a computer, the same way that you use Sketch and Figma, if we can come to a
Mm,
common understanding, I think that will be the uh, biggest thing. Right? Will be good for everyone. But beyond that, if you think about, maybe Kainoshi is one of our program managers, right? You also need to think about, certain things are achievable, but you need more time. There's a cost for doing things, and is that cost worth it to delay your MVP or make someone burn out, like we spoke about before? Is that worth it? Is that sustainable? And maybe you can build iteratively, right? How to think about designs or experience journeys, if you come up with ways on how to build iteratively. I think those are the things I wish people understood each
mm.
other better.
I think from my side, right, I would probably wish that developers can also extend ways of thinking into a more user-centric approach. You know,
Hmm.
uh, for designers, sometimes when we create the screens and it's being challenged by the developers, like why are we doing this, is not good, it's additional efforts, for example. And then designers have to like provide justifications, rationales on why we are doing this, for the fact that we have actually validated the screens, we have put users in mind, we have come up with the solutions accordingly, reach out to the business, and then presented the solutions to stakeholder, and then ultimately it comes down to developers. I think I do have some experience where,
Mm.
the output is being challenged, and then we have to like rework because it does not meet the capability from the developer. So I think one advice that I can give also is, as early as possible, if you can sync between designers and developers before you even propose solutions, that would be probably one of the ideal way that you can consider. This is not hard
Yeah.
rules, but one of
Yeah.
the suggestions.
And I
Mm,
think that that challenge should be both ways. Really. You
mm,
should be able to challenge the engineer saying, okay, why can't you achieve this? I have
yes.
seen in this ABCF, okay, explain the complexity to me. And I have seen this working very well. I think we have one of a couple of designers who came from a iOS background. Okay, he has developed iOS apps before, so he knows you. We can't bluff to him. He knows when I say something, and developing at least some knowledge of how these systems work from for a design. I think that's really that's opens for good constructive debate rather than saying, okay, I need to chop this part of the design, it doesn't work, I can't achieve this, right? What we need is constructive debate.
Mm, agree. All right, I think it's about time where we call it a day. It's almost 6. I would like to thank you, everybody who joined us in this space. I'm pretty hope I hope that in the future we will have many more, conversation between the designers and developers as well. Please look forward to that. Thanks, Janaka, for also taking us through the importance and some case study of system slash design thinking. For those of you who join Academy session for the first time, this happens every Friday, last Friday of the month. Live streams on YouTube in Aleph YouTube channels. So if you haven't subscribed, feel free to click the subscribe button down below. I believe it's in red color. All right, thank you everybody. Happy Friday and see you next month. Bye bye. Take care.